I'm Julie Grants, and I'm here with Peggy Harrell, an inductee into the 2003 Marin Women's Hall of Fame in the area of religion. Congratulations, Peggy, and welcome.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that you've been working with prisoners and their families for over 2 decades.
That's quite true.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your work?
When I went to seminary back in the early to late 70s, there was a class in the catalog at the seminary called the Prison Chaplain. And I went to seminary as an older student back then and had not had that experience, but had had many, many other social service experiences. And so I thought, that sounds kind of interesting. I think I'll go see what that class is about. And so I went with the first class that had ever gone from the seminary and the first class of seminarians that was actually ever accepted at the prison. And the prison was Vacaville, the state prison for the criminally insane. I have to say that it was all at the same time the worst experience I'd ever had in my life and also the most challenging and the best experience I'd ever had.
Wow.
So based on that experience, I decided that I would do some further work and take some more classes in the area of institutional ministry to see if that would indeed be where I was best suited to work.
And what kinds of other programs does your institutional ministry include?
When I started, there was, I had a little box with magazines and pencils and paper, and now we have 17 outside agencies that come through the front door to assist prisoners. Some of those agencies are the Bay Area Community Resources, who run our drug and alcohol in-house recovery units. Marin Abuse Services comes in. A wonderful practitioner comes in and does the Robin K. Sargent book on communication and spirituality, nonviolent ways to communicate. Center Force comes in and teaches parenting classes. Alcoholics Anonymous comes in. Narcotics Anonymous comes in. Marin AIDS Project comes in. The Family Law Counseling Office comes in. Detention Ministry out of the Archdiocese of San Francisco comes in. And Marin County Office of Education comes in. The Marin Literacy Association comes in and has many, many programs in its one umbrella. I think perhaps my favorite of their programs is a program called the Mothers and Fathers Reading Program. And it's just exciting for me to talk about. Mothers and fathers can still be parents and can still parent even though they are not physically with their children, even though they are in jail. And it's important for them to know that. It's important for the child to know that even though the parent is not with them, they still love them and want to be part of their lives in what way they can. So this is a program about learning to read to your child and the importance of that. You have a class, you go to 8 classes, and when you successfully complete that class, you're allowed to pick 2 children's books that you enjoyed reading, and you read one of those books onto tape. The books are sent home to the child as well as the tape with the parent's voice, so the child can hear the parent's voice even though they're separated. That's a really exciting, very special program, and one of the most fun things that we do there at a facility where there's not a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like you do much more than I might normally think of just as ministry. It reaches far beyond that one narrow field that I think of when I say that word. Mm-hmm. It goes into the education and the rehabilitation and working with the families as well.
Yes, it does. And I think that the old concept of ministry and what clergy did was a man in a pulpit in a congregation. And fortunately, today that's not true. All sorts of people get the call, as we say, and I am ordained by the United Church of Christ, the Northern California Conference, the Bay Association. And what all that means is that I come from a denomination whose tradition is largely the social gospel. And what I mean by that is that we aren't restricted to local parishes and local congregations, that we are encouraged to be out and about in the world, and that ministry is from among people. It's not from up above people, and it's not from way down the street. So I have always really enjoyed that part of our denomination's philosophy, and felt very supported in that. that we have clergy who serve in street ministry, we have clergy who serve in jails and chaplaincies, and clergy who serve in parishes, and we're encouraged to do so.
You've kind of explained to us a lot of the program at the county jail, but I know that you also work at San Quentin, and I
I do.
assume that that is a little bit different kind of a program and different effort on your part. Could you tell us about that?
Well, it's very different. I volunteered at San Quentin inside for a number of years, and that then ceased to be the best way for me to serve, and so I left the institution and did not work for a while, and then went back to visit a death row prisoner. I still had a friend who was a volunteer on death row, and he said, you know, I have a friend on the road that I go up into the unit to see, and nobody writes to him and nobody comes to visit him. And would you write to him? So I started to write to him, and then I wrote to him for maybe a year and a half, and then he asked me if I would visit. And that's a whole different ballgame than writing to somebody, sticking a stamp on a letter and putting it in a mailbox. So I began to visit him and found that a wonderful, profound experience in many ways. And with him came several of his friends and their friends. And then along with them came a phone call at one point from an attorney of one of the men on death row. And he said, you know, are you Reverend Peggy? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, have you been visiting my client for about 2 years? And I said, well, yes, I have. And he said, well, you know, his mental health began to dramatically improve around that time. And I wondered, I said, well, thank you for calling and thank you for letting me know. And so it was then that I took my training, my legal training, and started to help on some cases. It was that road that, of course, has led to the door of the execution chamber. But there's a whole lot of life and a whole lot of poignant and exciting and joy-filled living between the front door and the door of the chamber. And it's a privilege to be with folks at any point in their lives, and a special privilege to be with folks when they are facing, when they are in an execution situation. I have been awed and profoundly moved by the courage and the kindness and the sincerity of the men I have accompanied through this process. I've learned a lot from them. And we live each day. One of the things that I learned from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is that if we live each day as if this was the only day we had, then we get a lot out of life, and we enjoy life, and we love life. And that's the way it is, and that's what we do. Prisoners everywhere and on death row have enormously wonderful senses of humor, and that's something I've always appreciated. As I have aged with the prison population, they have also aged. And so my particular version of Grow Old Along With Me goes something like this. I overheard two prisoners saying the other day, you know, you haven't lived until you've been locked in a plexiglass cell with Reverend Peggy having a hot flash. And so now, instead of getting a lot of sweetheart cards for Valentine's Day, I get one card that says "To Our Mom," and they all pass it down the tier and they sign it. So that's my version of Grow Old Along With Me. The best is yet to be, and I think the best is yet to be.
Well, it sounds like such an interesting work that you do. I'm kind of interested to know, you didn't just fall upon this. How did this, what was your early life like, and how did you come to go into the ministry? How did you lead into the whole social work field?
Well, I grew up in a military environment. My dad was in the service, and so we moved around a whole lot. And so when I was a senior in high school, I actually had a best friend who was talking to me one day, and she said, you know, I've lived in the same darn house for 18 years, and I thought that was a foreign language because my parents were married 21 years and we moved 19 times. And so I come naturally to sort of an eclectic and open environment, because I saw so many different things and I learned so many different things, and I traveled a lot. And I didn't grow up with the kids next door. I grew up with 19 different families next door. And so I feel like that was the early start, because I looked at a lot of different lifestyles and a lot of different kinds of people. And when you see a lot of different kinds of people, you also begin to be educated about a lot of different kinds of needs that people have. And so that your focus, for me, it broadened my focus about what people were about in the world and what the world was really like. And I think that that probably was the beginning, because I had opportunities that a lot of people don't have. And I delivered newspapers, and I worked in a sandwich shop, and I worked in an orphanage, was probably my first, one of my first jobs. I worked in an orphanage as a house mother, and I did a lot of volunteer work in the hospital, and I had a variety of experiences. And then I think the thing that kicked me over the path of no return was the Vietnam War. And I was, I guess I was about 17, or I guess I was 18. And I was, at the time, I was working at the YMCA on the East Coast in South Carolina. And I noticed that there was a Navy chaplain coming to speak at the YMCA. He was coming to speak to the Young Men's Business Association luncheon. And so I said to the director of the Y, I'd really like to go to the luncheon and hear Chaplain Parker speak. My father had died in Vietnam as a result of Vietnam, and I wanted to hear what this chaplain had to say about his experience in country. And so he said, I'm sorry, it's the men's business luncheon, you can't go. And so, never having been one to go with the no, I got a chair and I sat it outside the classroom door where the lecture was, and I listened to the lecture. And I was just profoundly moved. And poor Chaplain Parker, when he came out the door, he fell over my chair. And I jumped up and I said, well, my name is Peggy and I want to come volunteer at your hospital. And he didn't say, but you're a girl. He didn't say you're too young. He didn't say, have you had any experience? He said, when can you be there? And so that was the start. And I read to blinded soldiers and Marines and airmen, and I wrote letters home to sweethearts. And I had the experience of, it's still hard to talk about sometimes, the experience of bringing mothers and family members to the bedside of critically wounded and dying men. And it was a profound experience.
Indeed.
And an experience that also helped me understand the way I wanted to be in the world, that I wanted to be a part of the world in a way that might have perhaps been different if I hadn't had all these experiences. And I think that sounds kind of simplistic, but what I mean by that is that I had seen a part of life that a lot of people don't get to see. And I knew how it changed my life to see that to see life in that way. And I wanted to be part of it.
It's interesting to hear some of your stories attached to these things and get a feel for how you got involved at that level, because I don't think that people just walk out the door one day and discover they want to do almost anything, but right. You've been able to find that as a result of your roots and your experiences. And did you then study at the university, or how? I know you graduated from the seminary, but I mean, what came before the seminary? Oh dear.
I do hope that some of the people who had the experience of having me in a classroom get to see this tape at some point, because they were all sure I was going to make it. I'm not somebody who really did really well in the classroom. I had the capability to do well, but I wasn't very interested, and I didn't feel very challenged. And what I mean by that is I am an experiential learner. I don't learn a way of being in the world by reading it out of a book. Some of it has been, of course, very helpful to me, but that's in retrospect. and reading is better for me later after I've had an experience. So I would say I went to the go a while, quit a while plan when it comes to college and even seminary. It took me 10 years to get through college because I was doing so many fascinating things in life. I didn't have time to go to class. And this, of course, was quite annoying to many of my professors. I think I had to take freshman history over 3 times before I ever got to the midterm. Those were the years when I was writing those letters I was telling you about, and life was much more exciting than a classroom was. So when I finally decided that I would go to seminary, I didn't have a college degree. And so I had to go back to college and finish to be accepted at the seminary. So it was at that point where I got more serious about my scholastic endeavors and finished school, and then applied for seminary. And because my academic record was so completely exciting, I was accepted on a probationary status. And so anybody who sees this and is not the bee's knees in the classroom, that's really okay. It's what's in your heart, and it's how you're able to live in the world that really matters. So then I went to seminary, and I did not go with the thought of becoming a member of the clergy. I knew I wanted to do some sort of social service work, but I didn't know what that was. And so seminary is 3 years, and I went to the Pacific School of Religion over in Berkeley, which is one of the Graduate Theological Union schools. And toward the end of my second year, they call it your middler year, the dean said, we were wondering if you had a plan. We were wondering if you were going to be ordained, or, what you were going to do, and we need you to make a decision. And not being one who likes to make those kind of decisions, I said, okay. So I went and I thought about it, and I thought about it a whole lot, and I talked to a lot of people I trusted, and I actually prayed. And I used to tell this friend of mine that I was afraid that I was a Christian only when it was an emergency. And she said, no, I've seen you the way you live. She says, I think you make the grade. However, you are an emergency prayer. So I prayed a lot, and what came to me was that my lifestyle, to which I was already committed, could indeed be also my vocation, and that it would fit together very well. And that the big G, as I'm fond of calling God, would show up and be, not only would show up, but had been there all along, and would be present in this endeavor, and that it was a good idea. So I go tooting back to the dean's office and announce that, yes, I'm going to become an ordained member of the clergy. And he says, okay, parish work. And I said, well, not exactly. And so I chose institutional ministry based on that class, one of those first classes I took in the seminary. And it was an interesting progress because in those days, the establishment was insistent that you serve in the parish first and then go to what they call specialized ministry. And so I didn't want to do that. And I think one of the reasons I understand fighting spirit of people is because I've had a lot of that in my own life. And at one point I was privileged to work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she gave me a very great gift. And she said to me one day, she said, when are you going to give up your negative rebellion for positive nonconformity? And obviously I've never forgotten that. And that was 30 years ago, I guess, 25, 30 years ago. And so I've carried that with me, and I do carry it with me. It was one of those profound experiences. Am I doing something just to make a fuss, or is it something I truly believe in, and where is that line?
Peggy, could you tell us about some of the influences in your life as you've gone along, not only early life but later, that have brought you to this point?
I would like to weave the part of people who've been influential in my life with the prison experience, because a lot of those people were behind the walls. And it's important that you know about them. one of the first people who had a profound experience on my life was one of the prisoners at Vacaville. And he was a prisoner, I think he was serving time for armed robbery, but I can't quite remember. And I really was very, very fond of him and learned a lot from him about how to be in the prison and how to take care of myself and what was necessary for ministry. And one day, he said to me, you know, they're taking photographs out in the lower yard, and would you and the other students come out and so we could have a picture in the lower yard, because we were graduating and we weren't going to be coming back anytime soon. So I said, sure, I'll come out in the yard, and everybody else was busy, so it just ended up to be myself and this prisoner. And we got out there, and I looked around, and I was completely overwhelmed and frightened. I was the only free person in the yard, the only woman in the yard, and there were hundreds of male prisoners in this yard, and there was a gun tower with a officer up in the gun tower, correctional officer in the gun tower with a gun, and that was it. And so I felt like I needed a hole to crawl in. I never wanted out of any place so fast, so much and so badly in my life. And so I said, the cameraman never came, and so I said, you know, I have to go in now. I'm really uncomfortable. I need to go in. So we got in, and I burst into tears. And his name was Earl. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and which of course he wasn't supposed to do, and he said, it's really okay. You know, the photographer was not coming. He said, I wanted to do that because I want you to know what you're going to be up against. And he said, you love me and you trust me, and you've been my pastor. However, you have to learn to love and to trust my brothers the way you do me, and to see them for who they are, and to see what it is that will be required of you. And so I've never forgotten that. So he was one of the first early influences in my life, was one of the people that I thought I was going to teach things to, that taught things to me. And then when I went, after I had been ordained and I went back to Vacaville to work, we have a wonderful, wonderful Catholic priest there by the name of Father Patrick Leslie. And Father Patrick is unorthodox, to say the least, and to say the best, he's the best of the best in a terrible situation. And being a woman in an all-male setting of that type, where many people are critically ill, where many people are working out how to be in life by being violent, where many people are seriously mentally ill, presents, to say the least, many challenges. And many of those challenges are sexual in nature. And I had been in prisons and jails for many, many years by that point, and a prisoner made an overture toward me that was completely inappropriate, and it was sexual in nature, and it frightened me badly. And I came back to the office, and I cried, and he was the first supervisor and or teacher that I had had in that environment that did not say to me, what did you do first? He did not say, what did you do to deserve this? How did you bring this about? He looked at me and he said, are you all right? And I said, well, I'm going to be all right. I'm pretty scared, but I'm going to be all right. He said, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Would you like me to drive you home? And that was such a different way to be responded to. He had not assumed that I, as a woman in an all-male institution, had done something inappropriate. So he has and continues to be a very special part of my life.
I think it's wonderful that you're able to tell us about the bumps in your road, as well as the successes as a result of clear thinking that came to you through whatever process there was along the way. But it's I think reassuring to a lot of our young people to know just the kinds of things that you've said. It's important for people to know that you can in fact seek and find if you're diligent and pursue what it is that's out there for you.
Well, and if somebody says no, and it's what your heart knows is right for you, then you find somebody who will say yes. And there are those somebodies out there who will say yes. Yeah. And You can call them up, you can find them. However it is, I don't quote Bible scripture very often, and have been challenged by my fellow clergy on that a lot. But one of my favorite, and I always reinterpret scripture a lot so that it fits my life and fits the life of the people that I work with and work for. There is some scripture about wandering around the walls of Jericho 40 times with the horn and blowing it 40 times and the wall not falling down. Well, I've been around the wall 40 times and the wall didn't come down, so I had to find a drain pipe to crawl in through. And so it's been a large key to my success to know where that drain pipe is, and I really know, and I'm happy to tell other people to, keep marching, and if it doesn't fall down for you either, you find that drain pipe and it's out there.
That's an absolutely wonderful story, and I really appreciate the time and interest that you've taken to tell us about this. It's a pleasure to have you as an honoree, and I thank you for your time.
You're very welcome, and thank you.